Today, we are going to tackle one of the most provocative and, let's be honest, kind of uncomfortable ideas in all of personal finance. The goal isn't to die rich. The goal is to die with zero.
So, to really get our heads around this, let's start with a story. It's about a guy named Richard. And Richard is the poster boy for everything we're taught about being smart with money. But, as you'll see, his story has a serious twist.
I mean, this guy did everything by the book. You know the playbook, right? He saved aggressively, maxed out his retirement accounts, always drove a practical car. He always put his future self first. He was the perfect financial citizen.
And he did this for 45 years. Just look at this timeline. At 25, when his buddies were backpacking through Europe, he was putting money into his investment accounts. At 45, when his family wanted those big, memorable vacations, he convinced them to wait, to save a little more. Finally, at 65, he retired. He'd done it. He'd reached the finish line. But his future, the one he'd sacrificed so much for, well, it didn't last very long.
When Richard passed away at just 70 years old, this is what was sitting in his bank account, $2.8 million. By any measure we use in society, the guy was a huge success. He died a multimillionaire. But is that really winning?
Let's look at this another way. That $2.8 million, it wasn't a trophy. It was basically a monument to a life of sacrifice. He spent 45 years collecting all these poker chips, these tokens of life. And then the game ended before he ever got to cash them in.
And that brings us to this really radical idea. One championed by a guy named Bill Perkins. It flips the entire goal of personal finance on its head. The objective isn't to grow your net worth until you die. It's to spend it all, strategically, so you finish with zero.
Now, to even begin to understand this, you have to change how you think about money. It's not a score. It's not about who has the most points. Money is just a tool. Think of it like a battery. It's a battery that stores your life energy. All those hours you traded, sitting in traffic, in meetings, away from your family, that's what's in the battery.
And here's the crucial takeaway from that idea. If you die with money left in the bank, that represents thousands of hours of your precious life that you basically gave away for free. You worked for something you never used. That number on the screen just, poof, disappears when you do.
But this gets even deeper, because conventional financial advice ignores the single most important variable in this whole equation, and that's your own biology. This chart just perfectly captures what we're talking about. A dollar is not worth the same at every point in your life. Come on. A $10,000 ski trip when you're 25? That's an epic, life-forming adventure. So much joy. At 45, it's still pretty great, but maybe your knees hurt a little more. But at 85, that same trip could be physically impossible, maybe even painful. The cost is the same, but your ability to turn that money into pure joy, it drops off a cliff.
You know, you can think of your life as this constant balancing act between three things: health, time, and money. When you're in your 20s, you've got tons of health and time, but you're broke. In your 50s, you finally have money and you've still got your health, but you have zero time. And then in your 80s, you've got money and time, but your health is gone. So saving all your resources for that last phase when you're least able to use them, it just doesn't make any sense.
Okay, I know what you're probably thinking right now, because this idea immediately brings up two massive and totally valid fears in people. First, what if I run out of money? And second, what about my kids? Let's tackle those head on. This is the big one. The number one reason people just hoard cash. And it's a real risk, right? You don't want to hit zero at age 75 and then live another 20 years. That would be a disaster. But the answer isn't just to blindly pile up more money.
See, the smart way to handle this fear isn't to just keep an extra $500,000 on the sidelines just in case. That's super inefficient. That's money, that's life energy you could be using right now. Instead, you hedge that risk. You use financial tools that were literally invented for this problem, like an annuity, which is designed to give you a paycheck every month for as long as you live. Problem solved. Now the rest of your money is free to be used.
All right, the second big objection, and this one really comes from a good place. Of course you want to help your kids, but the data shows our whole approach, or timing, is completely backwards.
Get this. This is the average age that a person in the US receives an inheritance from their parents. 60. Let that sink in for a second. By the time your kids get your money, they are probably retired or about to retire themselves.
So just compare the impact. Giving money to your 60-year-old kid, that's nice, it's bonus money for them.
But giving that same amount of money to them when they're 30? Whoa, that is life-changing. That could be a down payment. It could be starting a business. It could be getting out from under student loans. The idea is to give with a warm hand. Give it when it has the biggest impact. And, best of all, when you're still around to see the incredible joy it brings.
Okay, so if this is starting to make sense, if you're feeling the why, then the next question is how? How do you actually do this in real life without just being totally reckless? Let's get practical.
First thing, you have to start thinking about experiences as investments, not expenses. A great trip, learning a new skill, that's not money gone forever. That is an asset you just bought. And it's an asset that pays you memory dividends for the rest of your life. Every time you tell that story or look at that picture, you get a little payout of joy. And the earlier you invest, the longer those dividends compound. Next, you need to ditch that vague bucket list. It's too passive. Instead, you need to get active with time buckets. Literally draw out your life in 5-year blocks and start planning. Where do the big experiences fit? You want to hike the Appalachian Trail? Well, that probably fits better in your 30 to 35 bucket than your 70 to 75 bucket, right? This exercise creates real urgency because you suddenly realize that for most of us, the real scarcity isn't money, it's time. And all of this leads to a really wild conclusion, one that would probably give most financial advisors a heart attack. For anyone who's a good saver, if your net worth is still going up when you're 55, you're doing it wrong. You are working for free. You've already won the money game. Your goal from that point on should be to start a planned, intentional deaccumulation, where you actively spend down that wealth and convert it into life experiences.
At the end of the day, this whole philosophy just boils down to a very simple, very powerful truth. Life is not about trying to have the highest score on the leaderboard when the game is over. The point of life is to actually play the game. The real tragedy isn't dying broke, it's dying with a heart full of regret and a life left unlived. So I'm just going to leave you with this one question to chew on. Next time you look at your bank account, whatever that number is, remember that it's a record of your past. It's a direct result of all the trades you've made. Every time you said no to a trip or an adventure or an experience, a little piece of that is in that number. What experiences have you traded for the number you see today? And was it worth it?